Welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us today for this webinar training presentation. I'm going to introduce you to the different ways that your clients can hold securities, listed securities with BT Panorama. My name is David Giltrap. I'm part of the training and capability team here at BT, and a pleasure to present the session for you today. It's just gone 11 o'clock here in Sydney. Very large attendance again for this webinar. We have today to hear about this new Panorama functionality. Fantastic to see, and I can see a few of you are just connecting right now. Many of you will also be returning from our earlier webinars, either the webinar series that we ran in October and November last year, or more recently as part of our wrap to Panorama migration masterclasses, and also the cash investment strategy, which we ran last week as well. So if that's the case, a warm welcome back to you. Now this session is aimed at existing and new users to Panorama, and for those who've used other platforms before, including maybe BT Wrap, Asgard, you probably haven't had this amount of choice in relation to how your clients can hold their listed securities. So it'd be good to be across the options that you have. At the end of the session, the aim, or my aim, is really that you will walk away with a good understanding of the options, the various differences in the options, and how and when and where you can set up clients with their chosen holding option, and how that can be changed, how details can be changed as well going forward. I'll make reference again to the Panorama eAcademy training portal. You can expect a new standalone module covering these listed security holding options. That will be added very soon to the transactions and investments course in the not too distant future. So assuming you're a registered user for the site, I hope all of you are, you'll receive an email alerting you to when all new courses and modules are added to the library. So absolutely recommend you check that out when it lands. Now, in terms of timing, a lot that we're going to cover today. It really is a full session, about 45, maybe 50 minutes, depending on how quickly we get through and also how many questions we get throughout. And on that, if you do have any questions, the quickest, most efficient way to get questions through will be to type them into your Q&A section of your WebEx toolbar, not the chat. So the Q&A should be bottom right of your WebEx page. I'll be watching that throughout the session to see if anything comes through. So I'll attempt to answer all of those questions that come through. A final note, the session is being recorded, so it will be made available later, as well as the supporting slides, so that you or your colleagues can view it at a later time that is convenient. So without further delay, let's get into it. We'll have a look at the agenda, what we're going to cover today. And we'll start by introducing the three listed security holding options available with BT Panorama. And where possible, we'll try and link this back to options that you might have already experienced with wealth platforms in the past, including, of course, BT Wrap if you've been using Wrap and/or Asgard. After the brief intro of the options, we'll dive into listing of the key differences before drilling down into each one at a time and really walking you through those, because that's important to understand these differences and the relevant considerations that you'll make so that you can ultimately match the listed security holding option with the needs of your clients. So that's really important, that section. We'll consider the differences in IPO participation as well. Then we're going to have a look at setting how you set your listed security holding option for your clients, whether that's opening a new account or if you're changing it for a client account and then managing it going forward as well. We'll also have a look at external broker trading. We'll have a look at that and how you can do that, updating details going forward as well, and also some enhanced reporting that you'll find on Panorama to assist with the latest enhancements to Panorama with the listed security holding options. And we'll round out with all help and support and perhaps what your next steps might be now that you've got all this knowledge about the different holding options. So let's get right into it. And we'll start with a fairly high level consideration of the listed security holding methods or options that are available with Panorama for your clients, and also what Panorama accounts they can apply to. And a note from the outset, this is not relevant for Panorama compact accounts, and the reason for that being that directly held listed securities are not an option for that particular account type. So it is the Panorama full accounts that this applies to. So these are your options, and we'll go through each of these. But before we do, from the left, the nominee holding method is actually the Panorama listed security holding method that has applied from when listed securities trading was first made available on Panorama quite a few years ago now. Now, the two options to the right, the individual custodial HIN and the individual sponsored HIN holding methods, are likely that you've been more familiar with these in previous wealth platforms you've used. And this is certainly the case as the two options that you would have had with BT Wrap and Asgard as well. So a note that I'll also make, note that directly held listed securities can only be held by a client account under one holding type. So you can only choose one holding type for your clients directly held listed securities. But in addition to that, if your client is holding managed or tailored portfolio assets, they'll always be held under a nominee method. So in effect, that would allow, as an example, in one account, a client to hold listed securities directly under an IHIN, for example, and the listed security assets contained in the managed or tailored portfolio would actually be under the nominee custody method. So just a highlight there in terms of applicability of particular client accounts. So let's examine each holding method now a little more. So with the nominee method, this is in effect, as I mentioned, the default listed security holding method on BT Panorama. This is also sometimes referred to as an omnibus holding method or approach. You might have heard that phrase, and simply a structure where all Panorama listed security assets are held in a listed securities account with our sub-custodian, that's HSBC, and all effectively under one single HIN. Importantly, the client is the beneficial owner of these investments as recorded by our custodian administrator, BT Portfolio Services. Now, many of your existing Panorama clients holding listed securities likely have this nominee holding method. So because, as I've said, this has been the only option since launch of listed securities on Panorama. So the other two options, let's have a look at those now, and these have been released since very late last calendar year. So the individual custodial HIN, this will be familiar to you and has been available on BT Wrap, for example, and this is where an investor holds their listed securities under their own individual custodial HIN, and that is registered with BT Portfolio Services Limited as the custodian. Again, the client is the beneficial owner of these investments as recorded by the custodian, BT Portfolio Services. Now note this option is only available for Australian residents for tax purposes, and they have an Australian residential address, so that's important to call out. And in the case of superannuation clients, a TFN must be provided. So also note that this option includes a custodial HIN fee applicable for both Panorama Investments and Panorama Super clients. This is the only option that attracts an actual fee. The amount is $300 per annum, charged monthly, and it's only charged in month where listed securities are held within that month, and is itemised as such in both the client's cash statement and also the fee summary screens. Let's have a look at the last option that is available, and you'll likely also be familiar with this one as well, and that is the individual sponsored HIN. Now this is only available for Panorama investment client accounts and involves the client holding the securities in their own name under an individual HIN with direct ownership at the share registry. Couple of points to note with this one. The client must agree to be sponsored on CHESS by the administrator, that's BT Portfolio Services, and this option is only available for clients with an Australian residence and with an Australian residential and postal address. So they're the three options that we have. Before we move on to look at the differences between these, I just want to make a few notes about what will happen with the BT wrap to Panorama migration. Might be relevant for many of you for your listed securities clients. The first point basically is that if they are currently an individual custodial HIN, they will migrate across to Panorama and land with the same arrangement. The same for those with an individual sponsored HIN. They will come across with the same arrangement. Now, in relation to fees for your listed securities clients, this is of course included in what is, I guess, called the favourability assessment as part of the migration. Now, I'm not going to go into it further today because really that's not what we're here for today. And also all of that is very well handled in the migration FAQs that you'll find in the Wrap to Panorama Migration Hub in the bt.com.au site. Just had a question that's come through. Can we get a copy of the slides to be emailed after the presentation? Absolutely, yes. So like I said earlier, there will be a recording of the presentation, and the slides, we will ensure they are emailed out to you as well and made available. Okay, let's keep moving ahead. So a lot to cover, we'll keep going. We'll now investigate and dive into the key differences between the holding methods, because understanding these will enable you to align the right holding method with the needs of your clients. So I'll start very quickly by listing the key differences in the listed security holding methods that we've just introduced. Now, we looked at this on the previous slide, but it is worth recapping on a page, the legal and beneficial ownership differences. We'll consider the proxy voting rights, and this could well be important for some of your clients, not many, but some of it might be very important. We'll see how that plays out across the whole three holding methods. Next is corporate actions, and we will, there'll be some differences there that you must be across this area to, again, to ensure you align to the needs of your clients. Dividends and distributions from your clients' listed securities, where are they paid to and what flexibility does each holding method offer? And then extending that further, dividend reinvestment plans. So not all listed securities, of course, offer these, but where they do, to what extent does each method allow your clients to participate in those? Next is in relation to paperwork, and really where does all the share registry communications go for the different holding methods? Again, how that will align to your clients', I guess, propensity to want to receive and deal with what can be a fair amount of paperwork. And finally, we'll have a look at the participation in IPOs from both the perspective of just general participation and also IPOs where your client might have a broker firm allocation. Just had another couple of questions that have come through. I'll just try and deal with those. Will there be fees for the sponsored HIN? The custodial HIN is the only option where there is a fee charged on Panorama, and that was the $300. So no fee charged for the sponsored HIN option, but thanks for that question. You've got another question about transfers. Yes, there are transfers to be made across, and looking at the actual process, I don't go into that a lot within this session, and will probably take up a little bit more time than we have time for, but please do get in contact with probably your local BT representative, and can certainly walk you through the process and the forms and the expectation for timing with the transfers from an outside platform or broker. Okay, so let's look at these individually now. So, and we'll look across nominee, custodial and sponsored. And firstly, for the nominee holding method, and again, this, I guess, an omnibus structure, if you like, all under one single HIN, legally held in the name of our sub-custodian, and that is HSBC. And the client, importantly, is the beneficial owner as recorded by our custodian, BT Portfolio Services. Let's move to the individual custodial HIN method. And for this one, it's an individual HIN for each client. So legally held in the name of the custodian, BT Portfolio Services. Again, the client is the beneficial owner, and the account name of the client is actually listed in the CHESS registration details. Just a couple of notes, and we do often get the question about the ability of the custodian or the sub-custodian to borrow or leverage against holdings. They're absolutely prohibited from doing that, and don't do that. So that's often a question we get, but I just thought I'd address that as well in relation to the nominee and custodial HIN for your client's benefit, really there. And if we go through to the last one, the sponsored HIN, and of course, this is where the client holds the shares directly with the share registry and is both the legal and beneficial owner in their own name. So that's the differences there in the holding options with legal and beneficial ownership. So what about proxy voting rights? And this is the ability to have a say in how companies your clients are invested in, how they're run, and having votes cast in AGMs, for example. Now, really only one option here for Panorama Investments clients is interested in this aspect of share ownership. Both the nominee and the custodial HIN methods provide a situation where the custodian, BT Portfolio Services, they have the voting rights, and they will only exercise these if they ask for and receive instructions from investors or your clients. The point there, it generally does not do this. So generally proxy voting rights are not available for nominee and custodial. However, as I alluded to a moment ago, for your Panorama Investments clients interested in this aspect of share investing and retaining proxy voting rights, the individual sponsored HIN allows your clients to exercise any voting rights as a direct holder of the securities. And again, there are options here to align the needs of your clients to whatever the most suitable method is. Let's move on, and corporate actions. So there are differences here between the different holding methods. Now, for nominee and individual custodial, in both cases, the administrator receives effectively corporate actions communications, and you'll be alerted to these to upcoming events online via your Panorama Advisor site, as well as email, with reminders both 5 and 3 business days out from the closure date for a corporate action on Panorama. So absolutely communicated with there. Online participation is quite similar between the two. The main difference applying between nominee and custodial can be scale backs, and that can have a larger impact on the nominee holding method. So as the Omnibus type nominee method sees all clients' holdings under the one single HIN, and as scale backs are implemented on a per HIN basis, this is why investors can potentially be impacted to a greater level with scale backs than if they are electing to participate under either of the alternative methods where they hold an individual HIN. So worth noting and being aware of there. Now, for your investments clients with an individual sponsored HIN, they'll receive the corporate action communications directly from the share registry because they're the registered share holder, and they'll deal directly in relation to participation. Now, an exception does apply to corporate actions that can be accepted via a CHESS message. Examples of these are buybacks and takeovers, and for these sponsored HIN client accounts, the event will be displayed on your Panorama Advisor site to allow advisors the option to elect online, or they can do it directly with the share registry, but you do have the option for those particular types of corporate actions for your sponsored HIN clients. Now, if we turn our attention to where dividends and distributions out of your clients' listed securities can be paid, let's consider the options here across the different holding methods. And for both nominee and the individual custodial HIN method, this is where a stock pays a dividend. This will be paid into the client's Panorama cash or their transaction account within Panorama. Now, flexibility, you obviously have a bit more there with Panorama Investments clients with an individual sponsored HIN. So these clients can elect to have dividends received into an external bank account of their choice or into their Panorama transaction account. In effect, what happens with these clients is when they make their first buy into a stock for a sponsored HIN client, BT will send the client's TFN and their cash account details to the share registry, where the registry accepts CHESS messages to update the details. Now, if the client wishes to deposit dividends into an external bank account for these sponsored HIN clients, they'll need to update those directly with the share registry. Okay, so just the point there with sponsored HIN clients. But again, options here to meet the needs of your clients. And what about, so extending from that, dividend reinvestment plans? So what's the flexibility here? So under the nominee holding method and for your Panorama Investments clients only, note Panorama Investments only, you have stock by stock dividend reinvestment available. Now this can be selected at the time you place the trade online with Panorama, or can be updated at any time down the track from the client's portfolio valuation screen. So that's for your nominee method. Now for individual custodial HIN clients, dividend reinvestment is not available. Now, we're often asked this question, and the reason why this is not offered, as part of our obligations as trustee and custodian, we need to ensure that investors receive their correct entitlements. Now, the way in which we can meet this obligation is through reconciling the customer's cash account after each dividend. And if you play that out, it hence does preclude this option for custodial HIN clients. And if then we look at your sponsored HIN clients with their Panorama Investments account, they can of course participate in a DRP if it is offered by the listed security. And they can either do this via form from the share registry, or there may be the option with some share registries to complete this online via their website. So let's look a bit more now generally at paperwork and who receives that in relation to each of the holding methods. Just had another question that's come, another couple of questions. Copy of the presentation. Yes, this will be emailed out following, in addition to the recording of the session. And when clients with custodial HIN are migrated into Panorama, do we need to move them into nominee option manually? Yes, that you would need to do that. I think there's either an option online or paper-based, but yes, that can be selected to move them to nominee. So thanks for that question. Okay, so share registry communications. Now let's firstly look at the nominee method. So share registry paperwork will be directed automatically to the sub-custodian HSBC. It's shared via Zwift messages with the administrator and custodian BT Portfolio Services. So for your client, they're effectively removed from dealing with paperwork in relation to their listed securities. Quite similar for individual custodial HIN holding method, in that the administrator and custodian, BT Portfolio Services, receives all paperwork in relation to the listed securities direct from the share registry. So again, no paperwork for your client. Quite different from your individual sponsored HIN clients. They will directly receive all communications from the share registry. And for large numbers of holdings, this can add up to a fair amount of documentation and paperwork. So we're talking about requests to update bank account details held with the registry, DRP elections, requests to update details such as a tax file number, for example, notice of corporate actions, tax withholding forms, notice of shareholder meetings, proxy voting decisions. So there's a lot of information there and documentation that is received. You'd know there are some clients that like and actually enjoy to receive all the share registry paperwork, and some that don't. But again, you have the options here with Panorama to suit the needs of your clients. Just had a question that's come through, thanks Sandra, in relation to potential impact on scale backs. Is there any other key differences between nominee and custodial in relation to corporate actions? Not that I'm aware of. I mean, the key differences are the impact on scale backs. There's a different, obviously, structure in the way they're held, but there is that $300 fee. It really comes down to what you're after for your client. But thanks for that question, Sandra. Another question. What is the postcode used if we wish to log into the share registry to get a dividend statement for an individual? Not sure to the answer to that. Maybe we can take. That's quite a specific question. I think maybe Linda, if you get in contact with BT, and we can answer that question for you. Had another question through: will there a report post-migration to see which clients are on custodial, which are sponsored? Absolutely. I'll show you some reports you can access on Panorama later in the session when we look at reporting. So thanks for that, Glenn. All right, let's move ahead. The final difference that I'm going to consider before moving on is IPO participation. And I'll distinguish between general participation and broker firm allocations for clients to participate in an IPO. And if we look at both the nominee and individual custodial holding method, the first point is that general participation in IPOs is not supported. However, broker firm IPO allocations are available, and the experience actually in BT Wrap has historically been more take up with these than mere general IPO participation. A caveat, however, with the broker firm in relation to Panorama Super is that the trustee would need to firstly assess each IPO and confirm if it can be facilitated. A little bit more on this in a moment. And you do have more flexibility, again, as is generally the case with Panorama Investments for clients using the sponsored HIN method. And here, all general and broker firm allocations for IPOs will be available for your clients. And note your clients will deal directly with the issuer in relation to participation for those. And I guess just extending a little bit further with the broker firm IPO participation, for each holding method that's available, as I've outlined, broker firm allocations for an upcoming IPO are available, and with the additional note that the trustee needs to firstly assess in relation to Panorama Super. I would refer you to the handy flyer, advisor flyer you can see in front of you. This really guides what your role is, what the broker role is, and also what Panorama do in relation to your client's participation in broker firm IPO offers. You'll find this in help and support under managing your clients, then transactions and investments, and then under investment orders. So you'll also find, in addition to this advisor guide, other information to assist with trading generally through an approved external broker. So they all add up to those key differences between the three holding methods. I know we also do occasionally field questions from advisors. Do you provide a decision tree or a tool to help me select the right method for my client? Well, unfortunately, the short answer to that is no, we don't and we can't, as that could be akin to us providing personal advice. Instead, it is up to you to understand these differences that we've just run through and be able to align what each offers with the needs of your clients. And it's perhaps most obvious, but the most flexibility is provided to clients with the sponsored HIN option that's available for your Panorama Investments clients. So you probably gathered that as we went through the outline of the differences. And the differences are indeed very well outlined in a table format in Panorama's help and support section. And as I mentioned at the outset, we're not too far away from a new standalone module on listed security holding option types. to be launched in the Panorama Academy training portal. So that will be under, like I said, the Transactions Investments course. Look out for that, but if you're already registered, as I hope you are, you'll receive an automated email when that is launched and live. Okay, so let's now turn our attention to how and where you'd select the relevant listed security holding method for your clients on your Panorama Advisor site. And we'll consider when first opening an account and then how changes can be made to the holding method after the account is open. So this is a handy starting point. I've just dropped this in today straight out of the Panorama Help and Support section. Given that you know that the nominee option is essentially the default listed security holding method on Panorama, how and where do you select between the options? If we look at this table, we'll see for new clients to Panorama, this is selected at onboarding time, and then going forward, if a change is required to be made to the holding method, it will be a combination of online and paper-based solutions, largely depending on whether the client is currently holding listed securities or not. So let's firstly consider at account opening first. And this is the account settings section when opening a Panorama Investments account for your client. You'll see you have the three choices, including the sponsored HIN option for these account types. And if you do choose the sponsored HIN option for the client, note that this appears in the summary section prior to submitting the new account application. And I mentioned this already, but we'll send the client's Panorama Cash account details to the share registry for any new buys, but this can be changed directly with the share registry after and as required for your client. And the address for the primary contact on the account will be where share registry paperwork is sent. So just note that. And a further reminder for the Panorama Cash account will be sent to the share registry for new buys if Custodial HIN is chosen as well. And opening a new Panorama Super account, only two options to choose from here with no sponsored HIN option, of course. And again, in the summary notes for Custodial, a reminder that we'll send the details of the client's Panorama Cash account to the share registry when new buys are made into a stock. Let's have a look now at how you can make changes to the holding method down the track for a particular client account. And this is for a Panorama Investments account wanting to change from the default nominee to either Custodial HIN or sponsored HIN, and where they do not currently have any listed security holdings in their directly held listed security holdings in their account. Now in a client account, you'd go to account details, which were in here down the left-hand navigation menu, and then you'd select the tab across the top, additional services, which we're in right now. And you can see here the HIN selection option, and you'd simply select on the register button. We'll click on that and you'll be presented with this option here to select either, is it going to be sponsored or custodial? Let's firstly run through selecting the individual sponsored HIN first and then sweep back to custodial, which we've selected here. So we've selected the sponsored option. You can see a range of other decision buttons appear below. And the next one is, are you registering a new or existing HIN for the client? If we were to select to register an existing HIN, this would appear, and these are the steps: downloading the release authorization form, complete the form including cost-based details, obtain the client's signature, and have this emailed or physically mailed to Panorama. And upon receipt of the completed form, it's approximately allow 2 business days for the HIN to be available on Panorama for your clients. Let's go back to instead request a new sponsored HIN, and we've clicked on new here, and then it's either an online or an offline client approval. Let's firstly select the offline method. So this is a paper-based method. This would come up here, and for the offline client approval, you'll download the listed securities holding election form that you can see there. Step 1, obtain your client's signature and complete the form. Send to BT, again by either email or physical mail, and again approximately allow 2 days for the HIN to be available to commence trading shares for your clients. We'll go back to the online approval. So using this, of course, uses Panorama's digital consent process. Another couple of questions you'll answer in relation to whether TFN ABN is to be sent to the share registry, and also if the Panorama client cash account details are to be sent. But you'd select submit to proceed, and then you'll run through the normal Panorama digital consent process. I'm not going to go into that here. I'm certainly in the interest of time, and also that the process is very well covered and will be familiar with it as part of the overall digital consent process. And you can certainly revisit the digital consent training course in the Panorama eAcademy site if you need to look into that. Let's go back to the first part again. And what if we were to choose a custodial HIN instead of the sponsored for the client? And here you'll simply have the choice between online and offline. And again, very similar to the sponsored. If we choose offline, similar path, you'll download the listed securities holding election form, obtain client signatures, send it to BT, and again, a couple of days to have that loaded up, expect. And if we go back to the online method, again, selecting submit and a similar process and path through the Panorama digital consent method to allow you to obtain electronic approval from your client to proceed with that particular listed security holding option. Now let's have a quick look at a Panorama super account. So let's firstly look with no existing listed security holdings, and they're wanting to move from the nominee holding method to custodial. And again, it's from the client's additional services tab in their account details page. Firstly, selecting register to proceed. And you just have the choice here for online or offline. And if we choose offline, a very similar path here to earlier. You'll download the form, complete it, have it signed by the client, and send off to Panorama for processing. And again, if we go back to the online method, this will be familiar with you as well, selecting submit and the normal digital consent process to obtain electronic consent from your client to move to that particular holding option. So a lot of familiarity with the processes there. Again, either paper-based or a digital consent path for you to follow. Let's now look at applying for a sponsored or custodial HIN for a Panorama Investments account that already has directly held listed securities in their portfolio. And this is done by only done by a form basis. And note here is firstly check there are no outstanding orders, no trades being placed on listed securities, and no pending corporate action activity as well. You'd simply select register, and then it will proceed you to this screen. And for an individual HIN, whether custodial or sponsored, you'll download the listed securities holding election form. Have that signed by your client and sending to Panorama by email or physical mail again. Now looking at applying for a custodial HIN for a Panorama super account that already holds directly held listed securities in their portfolio. Again, firstly checking there's no outstanding orders on listed securities, no trades being placed, and no pending corporate action activity. That's important. You'll select register, and we'll take you to this particular screen. Very familiar. You'll see that, and you'll need to download the form, have that completed, signed by a client, and send to Panorama. Let's have a look at a couple of those forms and where you'll find those. You can download them from these screens here. These are quite simple to complete. Both of them are 2-page fillable PDF forms. You can type into them for completion, obviously, and in addition to download options on the screens I've just walked you through, they're also available from the Panorama Help and Support section for listed securities, and also under the Forms section within there. So very easy to locate. So let's move on to consider how you can change details for client accounts, external broking, trading, and also enhanced reporting. And that question came up earlier about reporting on Panorama. So let's dive into that now. But firstly, we'll have a look at trading through an external broker. And in relation to listed securities trading, Panorama provides the flexibility to use either our online broker or trades can be submitted using an approved external broker. So Panorama's Help and Support section has a download for this advisor guide that I've flashed up onto your screen, as well as an up-to-date listing of all the approved external brokers. Now, I think there's currently 16 of them, and they're assigned PID numbers as well. So I'm not going to run through the process, as the flyer does that extremely well in terms of your role and the broker's role, but I will address one aspect for you, and this will be relevant for perhaps for previous BT Wrap users. Some of you Wrap users may have been aware that you could trade through any broker for a client settling back via DVP or delivery versus payment with a particular PID and HIN. So the process with Panorama is different in that the broker needs to first have an agreement with BT Portfolio Services, and you'll need to submit a file for vetting to request settlement of trades. So if you're trading through external brokers, is important for you and the clients, and you'll want to be familiar with this advisor guide and the associated information, again, available from your help and support pages. Just had another question. Are we able to move clients from custodial or sponsored over to nominee? Yes, I haven't covered that. I understand that that is available to do that. I will actually follow that up and either add it in the slides that I send out to you, or there'll be a separate note that will get out to you. But apologies, I haven't covered that in this, but thanks for that question, Glenn. And I know we've got it from other people as well. So thanks for that question. So let's look now at changing address details for your Panorama Investments clients with a sponsored HIN holding method. So you can see in their additional services tab, the noted holding method is indicated there with a green tick as active, and you'll also see there's a link to view details as well. So let's select that, see what comes up, and this pop-up will appear showing the client's sponsored HIN along with their account name and address details held on the registry. And to amend address details, you can click on the link there to amend. This would come up, you'd be taken to this page, and again, the choice between an online or an offline way forward. And again, let's start with the offline, and you would download this form, the change of address CHESS registration form, to have completed and signed by the client before sending to BT by email, or again with the option of physical mail as well, and upon receipt we'll send to the registry for processing. And then if we return back to the online digital consent method or pathway, you'll select the correct updated address from the drop-down, of course, that you've already updated in the Panorama system for the client. Questions again below there about TFN, ABN and bank account details being sent before selecting submit to proceed. And again, following the normal digital consent process to send to your client for their electronic approval. You can access help and support for further assistance regarding changes to registration details, and this is a particular page here in help and support. This includes change of name for example, and you can also see links in addition to change of address form, which is only for sponsored HIN clients also. And again, simply 1- and 2-page fillable PDF forms for completion and return to BT. Just a note that the change of name form, so the one on the right, can only be sent via physical mail to BT. So no email option for that one, but it's as is indicated on the form. So updates to your Panorama Advisor site to take in the new different listed security holding methods available. You'll find new reporting fields, new columns, indicators, such as here, for example, on the corporate actions page, where the relevant holding type for a client account is displayed for you there that you can see. And then more broadly, and we had a question alluding to this earlier, more broadly across your complete client base, adding reporting data here in your business level report under client holdings. And this is where you can search across all assets, including listed securities by your client base, or you can simply select specific assets. And when we drill down to specific assets and then expanding out to see the client accounts, it will also show a new column for the listed security holding type, as you can see. This report is downloadable in a CSV to make it easy for you to work with. And the filter button also opens up various tools, of which also include the ability to quickly pinpoint particular holding methods used by your clients with these tick box option highlights. And I've mentioned help and support throughout this session, and this is where you'd find all the information that you need. It really is going to be a great resource for you about the listed security holding options, how to select a listed security holding type for your client, how to make changes and amendments, all the forms required, how to trade, potentially using external brokers, IPO participation. It's all there, and as I said, a great collection of resources available for you, including, as I've mentioned, a tabular or table format, clearly outlining each holding method. We're looking here at the just a comparison of the general holding types. Scrolling further down, you've got a listing of each of the differences that I outlined at the first component of this webinar. So that's all available for you. In addition to these slides that I'll send out, you've got them in help and support as well. We've just had a question that's come through. And if you do have questions, please keep them coming through. Under the sponsored option, but could provide an example where we could use the custodial versus the nominee to incur the $300 charge. I think the question is relating to what's the benefit of paying the $300 charge. There's not, when we ran through the differences, there's not a lot of difference between the nominee and the individual custodial. The two key differences are the difference in the structure, the way about the assets are actually held, and the potential impact on scalebacks. Beyond that, as you will have seen, there's not a lot of difference between the two. I would suspect going forward, a lot of clients will either be nominee or sponsored. Certainly for some clients where scalebacks are going to be an issue, if there is an issue with the particular legal structure of the holding method, that might be important. But I would suggest that the individual custodial HIN might not be as popular given the $300 fee. But again, it comes down to the needs of your clients and aligning what is available there as well. So thanks for that question. Hopefully that deals with that to a certain extent, but it'll be up to you to, I guess, have a look at the differences. And with the custodial HIN, you'll be weighing up that $300 fee. Is that worth it given what the extent of the differences are? So thanks for that question. Okay, so that brings us to the end of the webinar. Thank you very much for attending. If there are any other questions, please do type them in as we're going through the closing up. I'm happy to take any questions that come through. This has been all about introducing you to the 3 holding methods. I hope you've got a good understanding of the 3 methods, a lot of flexibility there. You've got an understanding of the differences. You've got an understanding about how to set when you're opening an account, change it going forward, reporting that we've got, impacts on IPOs, external asset trading. You've got all those resources in help and support, and also the Panorama e-Academy training portal as well. Certainly, if you haven't registered for that already, please do. I think we've got very close to 500 users on that site now, which is fantastic to see. So they're all gaining the benefit of learning a real deep understanding of Panorama for their clients. We've got another running of this webinar next week. As I said, it will be recorded. We'll put it up on the training site on BT that you can see there right in front of you. And that's it. There's no further questions that have come through. If you do have any questions, please do reply back and email us or your local BT contact. There will be a short survey at the end. Please let us know your comments. We'd love to hear your feedback, suggestions for the ways that we can improve the session and the training. Other than that, thanks very much for your attendance. Enjoy the rest of your day, and bye for now. Okay, thanks all.